Good afternoon, boys and girls. So, I haven't read from Mrs. Pigglewiggle for a while, so I'm going to go ahead and do that now. And if you remember, when we left off, Nicky had been given his first dose of the leadership pills. When he came home from school, he said, "Say, Mom, these shoes are really too heavy for school. Do you suppose I could have some new patrol boots?" "I'll ask your father," she said. After he had changed into his play clothes, his mother asked him where he was going, and he said, "I told Sylvia I'd help her patch the tire on her bike." In about half an hour, he was back with Sylvia, her little sister, and Roscoe. Leaving them outside on the porch, he came in and whispered excitedly to his mother, who was making apple turnovers, "Say, Mom, would you care if I gave my old trike to Sylvia's little sister? Hers is all rusty, and anyway, it's too little. And Sylvia and Roscoe and I are going to paint it up for the baby." "I think that would be very nice," said Mrs. Semicolon. "Your old tricycle's out in the garden house. Say, that'd be a good place to paint the other tricycle. You could put all that garden stuff down in the cellar." "Oh, boy!" Nicky hugged his mother so hard he got flour in his hair. "By the way," he said as he went out the door, "I asked a boy in my room to come over and play. His name's Jimmy Gopher. He had to go home and ask his mother. Send him out to the garden house when he comes." Jimmy Gopher, who came streaking up on his bicycle about 10 minutes later, was as big and strong and husky as Nicky. He also had red hair and freckles. Mrs. Semicolon was a little worried for fear he and Nicky might not be nice to the smaller children, who now included Sylvia, her little sister, her little brother, Roscoe, the Adams twins, who were only 4, and Priscilla Wick, who was 7. She kept looking out the window anxiously, but everything seemed to be very peaceful. For a while, they all carried things from the garden house to the cellar. Then Sylvia came in for a broom and a dustpan. Priscilla Wick wanted a pan of water and a cloth to wash the windows. Jimmy Gopher wanted to know where the turpentine was, and Roscoe wanted some steel wool to take the rust off of the tricycle. About 4:30, Mrs. Semicolon put 9 apple turnovers on a plate and was about to carry them to the children when she heard a commotion and looked out to see Jimmy Gopher put out his foot and trip Priscilla, who was carrying the pan of water. She fell flat, slopped water all over her play coat, and began to cry. Jimmy laughed uproariously. Hurriedly, Mrs. Semicolon went to the cupboard and got one of the leadership pills. Picking up the plate of turnovers and the pill, she opened the back door. She couldn't believe her eyes or her ears. Nicky, her own Nicky, the former bully, was helping Priscilla to her feet and wiping her tears. He was also saying sternly to Jimmy, "Listen, Jim, Priscilla's littler than you, and she's a girl. Nobody in our club hits girls or little kids. If you want to hit somebody, hit me if you can." Jimmy said sulkily, "Aw, I didn't hurt her. She's just an old baby." "I am not," Priscilla said. "I'm the pitcher on the neighborhood baseball team, but you got my play coat all wet, and I'm going to tell my father, and he'll make mashed potatoes out of you." Sylvia's little sister said, "He will, too. He's big." Mrs. Semicolon said, "How about a hot apple turnover?" "Hot diggity zowie! Oh, boy!" the children cried as they crowded around her. She gave them each a turnover, but before she gave Jimmy his, she tucked a leadership pill inside the crust. While the children were eating their little pies, she took Priscilla's coat in and put it on the hall radiator to dry and got one of Nicky's play jackets for her to wear. There was no more trouble, and just before the children had to go home for dinner, Sylvia came excitedly in and asked Mrs. Semicolon to come to her studio and see her little sister's old tricycle, which they had painted a beautiful bright red with silver handlebars and silver spokes on the wheels. The old garden house looked beautiful. The windows were shiny clean, the floor was swept, and Nicky and Jim had made a table out of 2 sawhorses and some old boards. "This is our work table," they told her proudly. Little Roscoe Eager said, "We got a club, Mrs. Semicolon, and we're all members, and it's to fix bicycles and stuff like that." Priscilla said, "We're going to call it the Neighborhood Children's Club." "Nick's the president," Jimmy said, "and I'm the supervisor because I'm awful good at mechanics and fixing things." "And I'm the secretary," Sylvia said. "I'm going to keep notes and make lists of work we have to do." I'm the treasurer, Priscilla said. I collect the dues and take the money when we sell lemonade and stuff like that. I'm the salesman, Roscoe said. I go around and find work for us to do. We're the helpers, said the Addams twins and Sylvia's little sister. We run home and get Daddy's hammer. Well, I'll be in charge of refreshments, said Mrs. Semicolon. And so will I, said Mrs. Eager, who'd come over to find Roscoe and had been standing on the stoop listening. I think the Neighborhood Children's Club is such a wonderful idea. I'm going to bake brownies for tomorrow's meeting. And, said Mrs. Semicolon, I'm going to scout around and see if I can't find some furniture for the clubhouse. I'm sure I've got an old kitchen table and 4 chairs up in the attic. And, Mom, would you care if we had a fire in the fireplace on cold days, Nicky asked, if we put up a fire screen and were very, very careful? I have an old grate they can have, said Mrs. Eager, and if they burn coal and use the fire screen, I think it'd be quite safe, don't you, Carlotta? Nick and I'll watch out for the little kids, said Jimmy earnestly. After all, we're the oldest and the biggest. Well, the neighborhood's children's club grew and grew. Different mothers gave them furniture. They even had an old couch, and some dishes and cookies and apples and cider and peanuts and popcorn. Mr. Semicolon built the boys a fine tool bench and gave them some of his older tools. Even Mr. Eager, who was a very good carpenter, controlled his terrible temper and came over and helped them build a porch. The Addams twins' mother, who used to be an artist, painted them a beautiful sign with smiling little children holding up red letters that spelled out the Neighborhood Children's Club. The day they put up the sign, they invited Mrs. Piggle Wiggle over for tea. Mrs. Semicolon had made a coconut cake, and Mrs. Eager brought over a big plate of fudge. There was a nice fire in the fireplace, and pink and white check tablecloth on the old kitchen table which Sylvia and Priscilla had painted pink. The only trouble was that the paint wasn't dry and the tablecloth stuck. In fact, they never could get it off, but it certainly looked pretty that day. Just before she went home, Mrs. Pigwiggle went in to see Mrs. Semicolon. Mrs. Semicolon said, "Oh, Mrs. Pigglewiggle, I'll never be able to thank you. Never." Mrs. Pigglewiggle said, "Don't thank me. Thank Mr. Pigglewiggle for leaving me that old sea chest full of magic cures for children. It was one of the finest things he ever did." "Oh, by the way," said Mrs. Semicolon, "I have quite a few leadership pills left. Let me get them for you." "Why don't you just keep them?" said Mrs. Pigglewiggle. "I have lots more, and with new children moving into the neighborhood and a clubhouse in your backyard, they might come in very handy." "Well, I've used them on 2 of the older children. I mean, besides Nicky," said Mrs. Semicolon. "Oh, Mrs. Pigglewiggle, I'm so very proud of Nicky. He's so patient and kind to the little children." "Of course he is," said Mrs. Pigglewiggle. Down inside, he probably always was. It was just that sometimes with children, especially boys, their bodies grow faster than their patience and kindness. All leadership pills do is even things up. Of course, having that wonderful clubhouse helps a lot. Busy children are happy children, and happy children are seldom quarrelsome. As Mrs. Pigglewiggle walked off down the street, in the dusk, her dog Wag on one side, Lightfoot the cat on the other, Mrs. Semicolon wiped her eyes with the corner of her apron and said to nobody in particular, "There goes the most wonderful little person in the whole world." And I read for longer than 5 minutes today, but I wanted to finish that chapter. And we do have a little bit left in Mrs. Pigglewiggle, but I'm actually going to stop there because each chapter is kind of its own little thing, because I got a new book that I'm going to start reading, you guys. And it's called Lulu and the Brontosaurus. And I ordered it, and it's really funny. I read it the other day, so I'm going to start reading you Lulu and the Brontosaurus next. And we'll start that later this week. See you later.